Right, well, here we are underneath the 2CV, and it's amazing how things always go wrong with cars, even when you're not using them. The problem is with it that you have to use vegetable oil to oil some rubber components to get rid of the groaning that you get from this suspension system now and again. And at the moment it groans like mad, so we're going to have a go at that. I'll come back to this in a couple of days, I think. And what was the other problem that I had? Right, so the other problem was the Dodge, and I don't know what happened, because it wasn't a problem before, but it's the clutch, and that rubbing noise is the clutch. This arm here, when you move it, of course it pushes itself through a hole in the floor there, and it's rubbing against the left hand side of this hole. Now I've tried, I don't quite know why it's out of position, but it seems to be linked with this brake pedal as well, and I can't really do anything with it. All it needs is a couple of mil filed off the side of the hole to stop it rubbing, so we're going to try and do that in a couple of days. It sounds an easier job than it is, you know, without having to take all the car apart. And certainly I haven't got a facility here actually to get the car up on a ramp. I haven't got a ramp here. Anyway, we're going to try and do that and the 2CV. Right, well, I just started the crossfire up, let it run for a minute, let the air conditioning run, sort of try and lubricate it a bit. It's not getting any use. So I'd sit in there and talk, but it's too noisy. I'll leave it for a second. God, the exhaust on this car sounds lovely. I don't know if the camera picked that up well, but that's a lovely note. Sounds like a V8, doesn't it? It's V6, of course. Well, I was going to talk about classic cars, or old cars, as I had started to talk about the other day. And I'm sitting here in this little Citroen, and I've got the doors open to let the breeze go through, and it's probably going to make a noise on the camera, so I'll sit this way, maybe keep the wind away. The thing is, I was looking at a sale of a car today, and I'm going to put this up here now on the screen. Right, as you can see, that was a wreck. It was a car that you would see it as a scrapyard. In fact, it would have gone to a scrapyard long before it got to that stage, because certainly it's not legal, and wouldn't have been legal for some time to drive it, not with the legislation that we have now. But that car sold for, you know, well over £100,000. That's a lot of money. I know it's a Ferrari, and all the Ferrari people and the car connoisseurs will be telling me that, you know, it's a special car. Well, it may well be, but it's still a car. It's still a piece of metal, a hunk of metal that's basically rusting away and needs probably, you know, a couple of £100,000, who knows, to bring it back to what it would have been before it had deteriorated to that stage. So I'm not going to comment any more on that, other than to say that isn't what I'm really talking about, because those cars are few and far between, and the people that can indulge at that level are, you know, few and far between. And once an investment has been made in a vehicle of that type, and its rarity and its desirability by a certain number of people who can afford it and want it, that value tends to stay with it. The same thing applies to antiques and paintings. Why is one painting worth millions, oil painting I'm talking about, by some famous old artist, and another painting that is, as pleasing perhaps in the eyes of many, worth very little? But the point is that once the value has been established for these particular group of paintings or particular group of antiques, then it tends to stay with them, and they don't represent the bulk of the product or commodities or items that are in circulation, in use. There are absolutely millions upon millions of cameras in use, for example, but only a few old particular Leicas or old early plate cameras maybe have some significant value. So I'm not talking in cars then about this sort of market and this sort of group. I'm talking about cars that most people who have a desire for them are able to afford at some point in their life perhaps to buy them. And if I'm going to put a financial or a figure on it, I don't really want to because of inflation and other people's expectations, because £5,000 is a lot of money to one person, and to another it's absolute bargain. They can afford it easily. But let's say we're talking sub £20,000, and at the moment in the UK at least, if you look at the £20,000 and down and below market for cars, old cars, classic cars, whatever you want to call them, you can buy some really nice cars, and the price is fundamentally, if you're assuming that the condition is good, the price is subject mainly to desirability and how we gauge desirability. And I think how we gauge this desirability is the issue that I'm going to talk about. Now, famously, a few weeks ago, a Triumph Herald in the UK, which normally a good one, say a convertible, would sell for around maybe 5,000 to 8,000 perhaps. A restored one just sold for £20,000. £20,000, I mean, that's a real lot of money for a Triumph Herald, when you consider that you could buy, or have been able to buy, let's say, a top-notch one in absolutely excellent condition for around £8,000-9,000. And why was it sold for that? Well, according to the auctioneer and the articles that I read about it, it was that it was simply restored in such an exquisite way that somebody who really, really wanted a Triumph Herald, basically better than a new one, was tempted to buy it. And maybe there only were one or two people bidding against each other, but that was the price. Now, why though was this Triumph Herald only selling for 20,000 when that Ferrari, in a complete state of wreckedness, were sold for well over 100,000? Because they're in completely different leagues, I think. Within the league of the Triumph Herald, we can discuss a lot of cars under £20,000, and I think that's where we'll stay. As humans, we have a very unique ability. Well, I don't think it's totally unique to us as humans. I think it probably applies to a lot of animals, but we are certainly able to express the results of it. And this ability is highly developed in the human brain, and that is the ability to subtly recognize faces, human faces. A good example, people sometimes don't really understand what a unique and amazing attribute this is. Now, if you take, I don't know, 1,000 or 100, 500, whatever, photographs of different people, and amongst them, they're all different, and amongst them you slip in a few people that you would know. Say, let's say that we're going to talk about famous film stars, let's say, and you then flick them, or you rapidly showed them on a screen just for split seconds. Now, the amazing thing is that within split seconds of these pictures being flashed in front of your face, in front of your eyes, and you're looking at them, you will instantly spot the faces that you know. Now, you could try this, and if you haven't already, and it is an amazing thing, and then you start to realize how our brain, we're not thinking of who these people are, but we recognize them immediately in a split second. Now, we could talk for hours on why this is and how it and why it was developed within the human brain, but let's just say that it is the situation. And it isn't just simply with faces, because we have a very developed ability to appreciate, as individuals, shapes and images, colors, balance of color, balance of shapes, and so on. That's why we, as a species, are able to design and to create what we consider to be beautiful objects, beautiful scenes, beautiful pictures, beautiful paintings, etc. And we also automatically, without thinking, appreciate design and color values, symmetry, that's the word I'm thinking of, within a design. And this is why we tend to, as individuals, find different designs, different shapes, different colors more appealing to us than other people. We have a variety of appreciation. And obviously this applies to cars. And I think until recently, and I don't believe it is the case so much now, but it was certainly the case during a period that let's put a fix on it, and let's say it was mainly the 50s, 60s, and probably into the 70s. So for maybe 3 decades, I believe that the design of the car, the actual shapes of the cars that were being built, played a major part in why people bought them. It wasn't the only reason, obviously. Now, when I was a young boy, driving with my parents in Canada, we'd play a game that most kids would play, that as cars came towards you, and there weren't that many cars on the roads in those days, but as a car came towards you, you had to guess, or you had to say what the car was, what make. And, like these human faces, you were able to instantly, after a while, recognize the cars. So I have a result of that is I have a very good knowledge of all the American cars that were built and sold during the 50s and 60s, or certainly the 50s. Now, this meant that we became, as individuals, more attracted to certain cars because of our developed feeling for design. And I think this plays a large part in why we as people are attracted to other people. I'm not going to get involved in, question of infatuation with the opposite sex and what have you, or the same sex these days. But anyway, infatuations with people. But it is true that, people are attracted to other people by their appearance. And some people have generically wonderful appearances, which tends to attract most people. And there are others that are, specifically made attractive to a certain smaller amount of people, perhaps. Because many of us seem to like a certain type of person, just as we like the look of a person I'm talking about, just as we like the certain type of color or design. Now, I don't think I'll go further, but because this will drag on. But I think it has a strong bearing on why some of us like certain cars. It's not the only reason, but that's one reason. I mean, obviously, we're attracted to cars because of the place they played in our life. And this is a bit of a cliche, really, but we all tend to want to have a car that our dad drove, or we drove in as kids, or we owned in a previous time in our life. That's quite common. If I go through all the cars that I owned and then how many of them I regret selling, that I have a feeling that, I'd love that car again. Why did I ever sell it? Well, if I had it back again, I probably would know why I sold it. But anyway, those all play a part. But why were we attracted to these cars in the first place when we bought them? Many of us, it was because we just loved the shape. I mean, I know people bought cars because they were practical, they were estate cars, they wanted them for their family to carry a lot of stuff in, perhaps, or they loved sporty cars, so the car had a sporting image or it had a sporting ability and all of that. But in many cases, people became attracted to the shape of the car. And I'm no different, and maybe it's more so with me. But when I look at that Dodge, for example, I just love the shape of it. And I know that, I used to travel in one when I was a kid, so there's that element. I know that I've got one, so I've become close to it in terms of the design by looking at it, and it's become familiar to me. But I do love the shape. And there are other cars of that period which I'm not so keen on, and they're very similar. So the subtlety of the differences within the similarities of the design are a thing that we as humans are aware of. Now, if we start putting car design into the periods that they were designed in, obviously they all tend to look the same. And people say now, and I'm one of them, that all the cars on the road that are new now all look the same. And that's true. I don't really know the difference between a lot of them. And the shape of the, take this car, for example. This shape here of this A-pillar, and that window, it's not dissimilar to the Audi TT that my wife had. But it's certainly nowhere near the type of A-pillar that's in my Citroen or that Dodge, or my Mercedes, for example, or many, many other cars. So these design cues tended to move between cars, but yet the cars were different. This car, for example, this Crossfire, is built on a Mercedes chassis, and it's very similar in a way in its overall shape to the Mercedes that it was spawned from. Yet it is a completely different design. Anyway, why do I like Citroen 2CVs and that Amy? Because I can understand that a lot of people don't, and I can understand why they don't. And why do I not really get attracted to sports cars? I mean, the closest I've ever had to a sports car, I think, well, I had an MGB once. And frankly, I didn't actually, well, I shouldn't say it, I didn't really like it that much. I think the reason I didn't like it was because it wasn't that fast. I had trying to think what car I had before that. I think I had a Triumph PI, the 2.5 litre PI Triumph of the early 70s. And I don't know why I traded it for a MGB, but the MGB was a lot slower and very heavy, it felt, and as I remember it, and laborious to drive. Strange, isn't it? It's lovely here in the woods. Lovely day, and the weather has been hot here for weeks, which is the same, I think, everywhere. And while we're all getting fed up with it, it seems, and we're wanting to have some warm sun, sorry, I mean warm sun, it's on my mind. What I mean is we want some cooler air, cooler weather, temperatures, and some rain. We'll all miss this lovely weather, and it's the trouble that you know, when you have something, you don't really appreciate it. And that's the same with cars. When you know, you question was, why did I sell that car? Well, so I got rid of this beautiful Cadillac, which I used to drive all around the country. It was lovely, red interior, black outside, and red leather. And I traded it for a wreck of a '57 Lincoln Premier, which then took me 2 or 3 years to have it restored. And at the end of it, it still never really, still was never really any good. So why did I do it? And ever since then, I've always been looking around and playing with the possibility of buying another Cadillac. What I'd really like is the one I had back again. But there you go, and that applies to so many cars. Sometimes it happens with women. That's another story, eh? So the question is, what is going to be the future with old cars and classic cars? What is going to be the future? That's what I think many people would like to know. Well, to answer the question, I'll just be a little brief. I think there's a lot of topics here now. One is, well, not in any particular order of importance or significance, should I say. There is the question of the government legislation and the seemingly desire for governments, certainly in the West anyway, to get rid of the combustion engine and to get rid of, to a point, get rid of personal transport, accessibility for individuals to have this readily available, instant personal transport. Then it's a question of cost, and that's the fact that, you know, at the moment we're having a big hike in fuel charges, and we are also moving into a period of great inflation, which is not to be it's not a surprise, because the governments are engineering this, in my opinion, as they have done in previous periods, say the 70s, for example. They're engineering this inflation because it's the way that the government, will be able to balance the books, because it's the only way they can actually pay back or get rid of the money that they spent during the pandemic period, the 2 years where they were printing money and well, it had been before that, but the way they can get rid of it mainly is through inflation. It's what they've always done. I mean, we went through the same thing in the 70s, exactly the same. Maybe a lot of people don't remember it or didn't live through it. So we've got a situation as well that we've got a changing population. We've got less younger people. We've got less younger people interested in cars. And also, certainly the younger people that are growing up now are not growing up with the situation that it was when, say for example, when me and lots of other people were growing up, and that was that every year we looked forward to the latest design, the newest car. Then there was a new model for every range every year, and now, you know, cars are just cars. So the love affair with the combustion engine and the motor car, I don't think is there with young people now. I don't think, cars were the most important thing in my life when I was young. I don't believe that to be the case now, certainly not with the majority of young people. They have a whole new world open to them, and it's in their mobile phones or their smartphones. So these people, this generation, will take over in another decade or so, and my generation will be gone, and every person of my age that goes is another person that is not we've lost another person interested in cars because they're not being replaced. So I think the demand for cars, old cars, is going to diminish. So we've got cost, we've got the fact that it will also, I think, possibly or maybe probably become more difficult to drive older cars around, or cars anyway, but it'll affect cars. Maybe restrictions on the type of roads that these older vehicles can drive on, maybe the time of day. Perhaps there'll be restrictions on the emissions, so they won't be able to be driven in city centres. I don't know. I don't think it's going to be good. Up until recently, here in Britain anyway, a number of the MPs who were influential in the government were classic car or older car buffs. They had cars, they liked them, so they were behind a lot of the legislation. But now you've got people in power who are not interested in cars. Cars is of no interest to them. So nothing goes on forever. This car was presumably a pride and joy of somebody at one stage. It was delivered new to somebody, and they loved it, washed it and cleaned it, and now it's sitting here amongst the weeds. Story of life, eh? So the fact that there are lots of classic cars around at the moment, and there's a big demand for many of them, and the prices tend to drift upwards, and in some cases, like that Ferrari, they rocket upwards. That doesn't mean to say that this will go on forever. And the fact that, we all covet after a particular type of car, even in the middle bracket field, even the fact that 2CVs like mine over there are going up in value at the moment and becoming fairly desirable, that does not mean that that's going to go on forever. Which is why I feel, unless you're going to invest in, and you've got the money to invest in a Ferrari, a £100,000 wreck of a Ferrari, you should keep your aspirations lower and keep below this 20,000. Anyone who can afford to invest £20,000 in, or close to that, in a vehicle that isn't their main daily driver, it's a luxury to a lot of people. So I think that's all I'm going to say today. See if anyone's got any views on these cars. But it has it's what I'm saying is, and why I'm saying it is because it has a bearing on what I am now doing with cars, and I'm not looking to, well, first of all, I've never really spent money on cars thinking that it was an investment. I've never considered it an investment. I considered it an indulgence. And an indulgence in my love affair with the vehicles that I've had that I really do like. I enjoy owning them, probably owning them more than anything else, and then I enjoy driving them, but certainly enjoyed owning them. So it's not been a waste of money, though in actual fact, in reality, of course it has. And certainly it hasn't been an investment, because there's been no return. There's only been losses, in financial terms that is, not in enjoyment terms. Okay, I will leave it there, and perhaps somebody will give me an opinion that I'd be interested to read it. Anyway, if you've got this far, as I say, thank you for watching this. Thanks a lot. Bye for now.